Shawn Buford's trial and divorce. I can't believe I got exposed for corrupting the police force back at Springfield and framing Charles for it. He and his family are so gonna pay for this, and so is my family.
Will you quit complaining already, Shawn? The two things you just listed are perfectly good reasons why you got arrested here at Rapper City. You and Alan put my job and Charles' job in jeopardy. You with your corruption scandal and Alan allowing child abuse at our kids' old high school. You know what? Why am I even explaining this to you? I don't even have time for this petty argument right now. Stand up and come with me to the car. Your trial begins soon.
All right, let's just get this over with.
At the courthouse.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Alfred Smith.
You may all be seated. All right, court is now in session. Today, we will be hearing the case of a corrupt cop and a real gaslighter. And going through the evidence that was presented to me, the defendant for this court hearing is former Springfield police officer Shawn Buford. Prosecutor Henry Maverick, read the charges.
Shawn Buford, you've been charged for child abuse, child neglect, child abandonment, child and spousal manipulation, falsification of police reports, and police corruption.
How do you plead?
Not guilty, Your Honor. My sorry excuse of a son is a racist and homophobic monster and an attempted murderer. I was only performing my duties as a police officer at Springfield. He and Simona even tried to use a machine gun and a ruby dagger to kill Sage Martell and Abigail Cassidy.
While it's true your son committed crimes during high school back at Springfield, the evidence shows that you had something to do with these so-called attempted murders. And the proof that you orchestrated a mass assault between the Sage Crew and your own son is a file showing a falsified police report you made against fellow officer Charles Martell. And speaking of the police force, my first witness, who just happened to be a fellow officer of yours, would like to have a word with you. And that officer is Ryo Tanaka.
Shawn, you've been a disgrace to our police force right from the start. You orchestrated a mass assault war between your own son and the Sage Crew. While I understand that Deacon and Simona messed with my daughter Sakura, what you did to him put not just my job on the line, but Charles' job. You corrupted our old police force. So for everything you've done back at Springfield, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Ryo. I call upon my next witness, Chiyo Tanaka.
I agree with Ryo. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Chiyo. I call upon my next witness, Sakura Tanaka.
Mr. Buford, I get that your son and Simona tried to hurt me out of racism and homophobia, but what you did to them prior to the day they got expelled and arrested was just as bad. You drove a very big wedge between them and the Sage Crew. And for what? All because Deacon ruined Sage's 17th birthday? What a stupid excuse. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Sakura. I call upon my next witness, Sara Tanaka.
I agree with my younger sister Sakura. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Sara. I call upon my next witness, Ren Tanaka.
I also find Mr. Buford guilty. His son Deacon may have been racist and homophobic towards my younger sister Sakura just because she was bisexual, but he was a victim of child abuse. So what his dad did was no better.
Thank you, Ren. I call upon my next witness, Akio Tanaka.
It's one thing for Trick to get beaten up, neglected, and disowned by his parents for acting racist towards me, Rocco, Rachel, and Veronica. But for Deacon to get severely punished by his own dad, who orchestrated a mass assault war between him, Simona, and the Sage Crew over ruining Sage's 17th birthday? That's even worse. I may not like it when Deacon and Simona acted racist and homophobic towards my younger sister Sakura, but what his dad did was no better. So I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Akio. I call upon my next witness, Kenji Tanaka.
I agree with Akio. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Kenji. I call upon my next witness, Hiroshi Tanaka.
I'm on the same page as Kenji. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Hiroshi. I call upon my next witness, Akira Tanaka.
I also find Mr. Buford guilty. Child abuse,
racism, and homophobia are all equally bad.
Thank you, Akira. I call upon my next witness, Jack Luna.
Look, Shawn, my wife Jupiter and I were worried about our daughter the moment your son dragged her out of the women's restroom due to her being a lesbian. But the punishment you gave Deacon for ruining Sage's 17th birthday prior to the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested was no better. The mass assault war you've planned out got most of the Sage crew, including Sage and Abigail, in really serious trouble. And the worst thing is, you disowned Deacon and pinned all the blame on not just your own son, but Charles, all because he fired you. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Jack. I call upon my next witness, Jupiter Luna.
I agree with Jack. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Jupiter. I call upon my next witness, Storm Luna.
Mr. Buford, I know Deacon dragged me out of the women's restroom all because I was a lesbian, but that's nothing compared to setting up a mass assault war between him and Sage. You jeopardized the entire Martell family's lives and made Sage's dad the criminal you turned out to be. So for everything you've done, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Storm. I call upon my next witness, Ethan Cassidy.
Shawn, what you had Sage do to your own son was incredibly stupid, extremely violent, and very dangerous. You even put my own daughter Abigail in danger. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Ethan. I call upon my next witness, Charlotte Cassidy.
I agree with Ethan. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Charlotte. I call upon the first main victim of the crime, Abigail Cassidy.
Mr. Buford, this whole revenge scheme you plotted between my ex and your own son drove his own ex to hold me hostage with a ruby dagger in her possession. You almost got me killed. And you even drove me to shoot your own son in the leg with Desert Eagle guns. So for getting me involved in a violent war against Deacon and Simona, I say you're guilty.
Wait a minute. Abigail, you shot Deacon in the legs with Desert Eagle guns?
Yeah, but ever since Luke and Victoria told me about Sage and Vincent bullying Deacon along with Caden and Trip, I broke up with Sage and apologized to Deacon for shooting him.
Abigail, what you did to Deacon prior to the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested was very dangerous. You could have killed him by shooting him with those guns like that. But lucky for you, no charges will be pressed against you, because you did the right thing making amends with him and Simona. So I'll just go easy on you. Anyway, I call upon my next witness, Felix McMilen.
Sure, what Abigail did to Deacon was wrong, but she was misled into doing that by his own father. Between the corruption scandal he orchestrated and the mass assault against his own son, he's done much worse than the time Deacon teamed up with Kedashi to taunt people. Therefore, I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Rex. I call upon my next witness, Felix McMilen.
I agree with my brother. I say Mr. Buford's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Felix. I call upon my next witness, Patrick Westbrook.
Shawn's as much of a gaslighter as Alan Jones is. He orchestrated the mass assault between his own son Deacon and the Sage crew, including my daughter Ruby. And he not only forced Sage to get revenge on him for ruining his 17th birthday, but framed Charles for being the mastermind behind that and the corruption scandal at Springfield. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Patrick. I call upon my next witness, Sadie Westbrook.
I agree with Patrick. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Sadie. I call upon my next witness, Ruby Westbrook.
Even though my ex Vincent and Sage bullied Deacon for having long hair, they never wanted to form a mass assault against him or get revenge for ruining the latter's 17th birthday. So what Sage said about that mass assault against Deacon in Explosive Teddy and Lofty the Rapper Offline Guy 2000's respective channels was all true. Mr. Buford planned this whole thing. Not only did it almost cost the life of my best friend Abigail, but it also left both Deacon and Simona severely injured. And Deacon's own dad saw fit to disown him while pretending to have no knowledge of that war. Therefore, I find that corrupt cop guilty for all the backlash my friends and I got.
Thank you, Ruby. I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Charles Myrtle.
Shawn, you nearly cost me my job as a police officer. First you forced Sage to get revenge on your own son for ruining his 17th birthday by orchestrating a mass assault war between Deacon and his ex and most of the Sage crew. And then you falsified a police report on a corruption scandal back at Springfield, framing May for it in the process. All because they fired you after when you disowned your own son. And what's worse, you not only manipulated your own wife into disowning Deacon the day and Simona got expelled and arrested for that war, you cheated on her with some strippers.
What? Shawn cheated on Savannah?
Yup. And for all the stuff you did, Shawn, I say you're guilty.
Oh boy, she's gonna be angry once she comes up to the stand. Shawn, Savannah would like to have a word with you when the time comes for her to testify. But for now, I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Lily Martle.
Shawn, what you did was incredibly stupid, totally selfish, and out of line. You put my family's lives, even Charles' job, on the line. You even gaslighted your own wife and abused your own son. And for everything you've done to us and your own family, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Lily. I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Sage Martle.
Aside from all the stuff Mr. Buford did to my family and Deacon, he tried to shoot his own son when he confronted him at his apartment here in Rapper City.
He what?
Yeah. And the evidence I have to prove it is the gun Mr. Buford threatened to use to shoot him. Deacon's mom didn't agree with it and she tried to stop him. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Okay. Now that was completely unacceptable. Threatening to shoot Deacon, your own son. That's an additional charge for attempted murder. As for you, Sage, thanks for the evidence.
You're welcome, Your Honor.
But anyways, I call upon the next main victim of the crime, Vincent Martle.
I know Sage and I bullied Deacon for having long hair, but we had no intention of getting revenge on him for ruining my brother's 17th birthday. Mr. Buford planned that whole thing. He used us and our friends to commit a mass assault against not just Deacon, but Simona too. And then he framed our dad for it and corrupting the Springfield Police Department. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Vincent. I call upon my next witness, Landon Dale.
My eldest son Michael may have bullied Deacon for having long hair, but like the Martell family, he was dragged into that mass assault war against Deacon and Simona. What Shawn did to his own son, especially for ruining Sage's 17th birthday, not only cost him his own job, but put his own family's lives and the Martell family's lives in jeopardy. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Landon. I call upon my next witness, Kendra Dale.
I agree with Landon. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Kendra. I call upon my next witness, Michael Dale.
I know I was one of Deacon's childhood bullies prior to high school, but making fun of him for having long hair is nothing compared to what his dad did to him. Mr. Buford forced Sage to get revenge on the former's own son for ruining the latter's 17th birthday and got me, my ex-girlfriend Stephanie, and the rest of our friends involved. And he pretended to have no knowledge of the whole thing and disowned Deacon the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested for that and messing with Sakura. Therefore, I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Michael. I call upon my next witness, Indigo Dale.
I agree with Michael. That mass assault war he got involved in against Deacon and Simona was way worse than the time my older brother picked on him. So I find Deacon's dad guilty.
Thank you, Indigo. I call upon my next witness, Mason Dale.
I'm on the same page as Indigo. I find Deacon's dad guilty and I hope he gets sentenced for a very long time.
Thank you, Mason. I call upon my next witness, Frederick Halifax.
My son Dustin may have bullied Deacon for having long hair, but ever since Deacon ruined Sage's 17th birthday, his father took things too far. He orchestrated a mass assault war between the Sage crew and his own son as a punishment for what happened that day. And the worst thing is, Deacon and Simona were severely injured. After that, Shawn disowned Deacon when he and Simona got expelled and arrested, denying full responsibility for his hand at that extremely violent scenario. His wife Savannah was also manipulated into disowning their own son that day. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Frederick. I call upon my next witness, Tracy Halifax.
I agree with Frederick. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Tracy. I call upon my next witness, Dustin Halifax.
I know I had a hand at bullying Deacon for having long hair, but his dad's no better, because he orchestrated that mass assault war between my friends, his own son, and Simona. Even though my former principal was the brains behind most of the mass assaults against Tripp and most of his friends, Mr. Buford was an even bigger gaslighter than Mr. Jones. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Dustin. I call upon my next witness, Dexter Dash.
Shawn's a bad father. He severely punished his own son Deacon by orchestrating a mass assault war between him, Simona, and the Sage crew, all because he ruined Sage's 17th birthday. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Dexter. I call upon my next witness, Annabelle Dash.
I agree with Dexter. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Annabelle. I call upon my next witness, Weston Dash.
Even though my cousin bullied Deacon for having long hair, Mr. Buford did much worse than Dustin ever could. Aside from orchestrating that mass assault war against his own son and Simona, he framed Mr. Martell for corrupting the police force back at Springfield. That makes him a child abuser and a corrupt cop. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Weston. I call upon my next witness, Mackenzie Dash.
I agree with Weston. I find Deacon's dad guilty.
Thank you, Mackenzie. I call upon my next witness, Richard Rivera.
It's one thing for Sage to get my first son Luke involved in the very first mass assault against Tripp for throwing a glass bottle at the former in the head. But for Shawn to force Sage to get revenge on his own son for ruining the latter's 17th birthday, by orchestrating a mass assault war against him and Simona? That's wrong. So for everything Shawn's done, especially to Deacon, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Richard. I call upon my next witness, Adrianna Rivera.
I agree with Richard. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Adrianna. I call upon my next witness, Luke Rivera.
Senor Buford, you've gone plumb loco. I already had enough trouble with Sage getting me involved in all of those mass assaults against Tripp and most of his amigos. But to have you be the brains behind that mass assault war against your own son Deacon and his ex-Simona is even worse. You made us accessories to crew abuse. And for dragging him and amigos into that mass assault war against Deacon and Simona and framing Senor Martel for that and corrupting the police force, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Luke. I call upon my next witness, CJ Rivera.
I agree with my older hermano. I say Senor Buford's guilty.
Thank you, CJ. I call upon my next witness, Aiden Omega.
You know, Shawn, when my wife and I heard about you orchestrating that mass assault war against your own son Deacon and Simona, we were totally shocked beyond belief. And even more so because you framed Charles for it and set up a corruption scandal within the Springfield Police Department. You've crossed the line in more ways than one. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Aiden. I call upon my next witness, Natalie Omega.
I agree with Aiden. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Natalie. I call upon my next witness, Dominic Omega.
You know, Mr. Buford, you made a very lousy gaslighter. Ever since Luke and Victoria told everyone that Deacon was bullied by him, Sage, Vincent, Michael Hale, and Dustin Halifax, we all thought Mr. Martel was the corrupt cop, but no. But ever since we saw that apology video made by the Martels, we were wrong. The only corrupt cop I see here is you. You're the real culprit here. So for everything you did, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Dominic. I call upon my next witness, Conrad Brown.
Deacon may have acted violent upon seeing Tripp getting knocked out by the Sage crew, leading to my daughter Taylor liking him in the head with a baseball bat. But she regretted doing it upon finding out that he got bullied by Sage and Vincent Martel, Luke Rivera, Michael Gale, and Dustin Halifax for having long hair. Shawn, however, had no remorse when he had the Sage crew form a mass assault against his own son and Simona as a punishment for ruining Sage's 17th birthday. And to make things worse, he pinned all the blame on Charles Martel for that and forming a police corruption scandal to cover up his tracks and get away with his actions. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Conrad. I call upon my next witness, Trinity Brown.
I agree with Conrad. I say Shawn's guilty as charged.
Thank you, Trinity. I call upon my next witness, Felix Brown.
It's one thing for Deacon to get bullied by Sage, Vincent, Michael Dale, Dustin Halifax, and Luke Rivera for having long hair. It's another thing for my sister Taylor to hit him in the head for getting revenge on Sage for orchestrating the first mass assault against Trip. But for Mr. Buford to punish Deacon severely for ruining Sage's 17th birthday by orchestrating a mass assault against him and Simona and trick Sage into putting it into action? That was so not cool. So for that and framing Sage and Vincent's dad for corrupting the Springfield Police Department, I find Deacon's dad guilty.
Thank you, Felix Brown. I call upon my next witness, Kingsley Brown.
I agree with Felix. I find Deacon's dad guilty as charged.
Thank you, Kingsley. I call upon my next witness, Wallace Brown.
I'm on the same page as Kingsley. I find Deacon's dad guilty for child abuse, child neglect, child abandonment, child manipulation, and police corruption.
Thank you, Wallace. I call upon my next witness, Titan Brown.
I also say Mr. Buford's guilty. From what I heard, Felix, Kingsley, and Taylor were shocked to hear what he did to us. Mainly the myrtles in his own son.
Thank you, Titan. I call upon my next witness, Taylor Brown.
I know I whacked Deacon in the head with a baseball bat and I regretted doing so when I found out he got bullied by Sage, Vincent, Luke Rivera, Michael Dale, and Dustin Halifax. But what Mr. Buford did was much worse. He orchestrated that mass assault war between us and his own son. Simona even got dragged into it. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Taylor. I call upon my next witness, Bennett Carter.
Shawn, you wily dingo, you've gone too far. Orchestrating a mass assault against your own son, framing Charles Martel for it, and manipulating Savannah into disowning Deacon? That was the worst thing you've ever done. And to do that to not just the Martels, but your own family? Crikey. You've gone nuts. And for that, I say you are guilty.
Thank you, Bennett. I call upon my next witness, Ava Carter.
I agree with Bennett. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Ava. I call upon my next witness, Neville Carter.
Mr. Buford, what you did to the Martels and your own son Deacon was even worse than the stuff Mr. and Mrs. Wilson did to their son. You pulled the same trick Mr. Jones did. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Neville. I call upon my next witness, Victoria Carter.
You know, Mr. Buford, I was shocked when Luke told me that he bullied Deacon alongside Sage, Vincent, Michael Dale, and Dustin Halifax. But when word got out that you planned that whole mass assault against him and Simona, we couldn't believe it. What you did was completely messed up. For all the stuff you did, including the time you framed Sage and Vincent's dad for corrupting the Springfield Police Department, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Victoria. I call upon my next witness, August Webb.
Despite the fact Deacon acted homophobic towards Storm and Sakura because they were both members of the LGBTQ community, Shawn did much worse. First he planned out a mass assault war between his own son and the Sage Crew. Then he pinned all the blame on Deacon while denying full responsibility for it when he disowned him. And finally, when he got fired, he framed Charles Martel for corrupting their old police force back at Springfield. Overall, he's an even bigger gaslighter than Alan Jones. So in conclusion, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, August. I call upon my next witness, Hazel Webb.
I agree with August. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Hazel. I call upon my next witness, Emery Webb.
Mr. Buford, I know Deacon dragged my girlfriend Storm out of the women's restroom all because we're lesbians, but what you did to him for ruining Sage's 17th birthday was no better. You started an all-out mass assault war between your own son and the Sage Crew. You even framed Mr. Martel for not just that, but a police corruption scandal. And for everything you've done, I say you're guilty. You hear me? Guilty.
Thank you, Emery. I call upon my next witness, Devon Miracle.
You know, Shawn, I was surprised when my daughter Nova told me and her mother what you did upon seeing that apology video made by Sage, Vincent, Michael Dale, and Dustin Halifax. You started a mass assault war between your own son and the Sage Crew, disowned him out of hypocrisy the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested, and worst of all, you framed Charles Martel for orchestrating a police corruption scandal within your old precinct back at Springfield. You ruined not just your family's lives, but the Martell family's lives too. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Devon. I call upon my next witness, Ellie Miracle.
I agree with Devon. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Ellie. I call upon my next witness, Nova Miracle.
Look! I may be of Chinese descent while Satura is of Japanese descent, which technically makes us both Asian Americans, but I know what it's like dealing with racist people. But what Deacon and Simona did to Sakura wasn't even serious enough for you to disown your own son, Mr. Buford. Not to mention, you've done much worse than he did. You neglected his injuries after when he and Simona got brutally attacked by my friends in a mass assault war. You started over Deacon, ruining Sage's 17th birthday. And worst of all, you framed Mr. Martell for corrupting your old police force back at Springfield. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Nova. I call upon my next witness, Jillian Miracle.
I agree with my older sister Nova. I find Deacon's dad guilty.
Thank you, Julia. I call upon my next witness, Dismal Gavin.
Look, Shawn, I know Deacon acted homophobic towards both Storm and Sakura and acted racist towards the latter, but he was bullied by Sage, Vincent, Luke, Michael Dale, and Dustin. Unfortunately though, after all this time, you seem to have forgotten about that, but that's not the worst part. Aside from disregarding the fact he was bullied for having long hair, you started a mass assault war between him and the Sage crew as a punishment for ruining Sage's 17th birthday. Sure, Miguel Martinez and Andrea also fought the same type of war against Deacon and Simon and JG the Animator 05's channel, but you started this whole thing. And to add further insult, you framed Charles for a police corruption scandal as payback for firing you for disowning Deacon. And for doing all that stuff, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Diesel. I call upon my next witness, Eric Gavin.
I agree with my dad. Sure, Deacon tried to ruin Stephanie's slumber party alongside his ex Simona and their friends Trip and Alexine, but Mr. Buford's done much worse. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Eric. I call upon my next witness, Stephanie Gavin.
Mr. Buford's been a bad father since the very beginning. He neglected Deacon's injuries when he got assaulted by me and my friends, all because he ruined Sage's 17th birthday. Then he disowned his own son while denying full responsibility for ever orchestrating that mass assault in the first place. And finally, he framed Mr. Martell for it. All because Sage and Vincent's father fired him after Deacon's disowning. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Stephanie. I call upon my next witness, Natalie Gavin.
You know, I'm starting to see why Deacon messed with my sister and her friends in the first place. And it's not just because he got bullied by Sage, Vincent, Luke Rivera, Michael Dale, and Justin Halifax for having long hair. It's because Mr. Buford did nothing to help him good. All he did was neglect his injuries upon orchestrating a mass assault between him and the Sage crew, disowned him the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested, and worst of all, he threatened to shoot his own son when he confronted him upon getting bailed out by Ashlyn Brooksdale. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Natalie. I call upon my next witness, Terrance Gavin.
I agree with Natalie. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Terrance. I call upon my next witness, Elizabeth Gavin.
I'm on the same page as Terrance. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I call upon my next witness, Joseph Gavin.
I also find Deacon's dad guilty. My mom could never stoop as low as he did when it comes to police corruption. Not in this channel anyway.
Thank you, Joseph. I call upon my next witness, Atmore.
From what Stephanie told me, Mr. Buford set up a mass assault war between his own son and most of her friends from Springfield as payback for ruining Sage's 17th birthday. He even framed Mr. Martell for it. And when the decks grew and I found out Trip got bullied by Sage, Vincent, Luke, Michael Dale, and Dustin Halifax, we all thought Sage and Vincent's dad was a bad influence to them. But when Stephanie saw that apology video made by Sage and Vincent, that's when we realized that we were wrong. So in conclusion, Mr. Buford duped us, all of us, and for that, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Art. I call upon my next witness, Maxwell Worthington.
I agree with Art. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Maxwell. I call upon my next witness, Marvin Jonas.
Look, Mr. Buford, I know what it's like dealing with racism. Before I found out the truth about your true colors, Sage tried to insult me with a racial slur without an N-word pass. And that was before my former creator got called out for doing something inappropriate on social media. But more to the point, you were never there for Deacon when he got bullied. And because of that and all the time he spent getting bullied for having long hair, he became the racist and homophobic bully you neglected and kicked out of your life. You even tricked the Sage crew into committing a mass assault against him and Simona, your own son. And for what? All because Deacon ruined Sage's 17th birthday? That's pathetic. And worst of all, you set Mr. Martel up for a police corruption scandal at your old precinct back at Springfield. So for everything you did, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Marvin. I call upon my next witness, Duncan Clark.
I agree with Marvin. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Duncan. I call upon my next witness, Thiago Urena.
I'm on the same page as Duncan. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Thiago. I call upon my next witness, Tranquil Adams.
I also say Mr. Buford's guilty as charged. From what I heard, the rest of the Dex crew feels the same way.
Thank you, Tranquil. I call upon my next witness, Harry Bennett.
Shawn Buford's a corrupt cop and a bad parent. He corrupted his former precinct, neglected and abandoned his own son Deacon, and tricked the whole Sage crew into assaulting him. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Harry. I call upon my next witness, Catherine Bennett.
I agree with Harry. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Catherine. I call upon my next witness, Lucas Gonzales Bennett.
Senor Buford may not be as bad as Senor Webster, but he's worse than my former poppy because the former orchestrated a mass assault war between his own son and the Sage crew. And to make things worse, he framed Sage and Vincent's poppy for committing a police corruption scandal within his old precinct back at Springfield, even after when he got fired. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Lucas. I call upon my next witness, Cadence Gonzales Bennett.
As someone who got disowned in spite of getting bullied in the past, I understand how Deacon felt. His poppy reminds me of my former poppy because despite the fact Deacon got bullied by the Martel hermanos and trace of their amigos, Senor Buford planned a mass assault against him. And he did so all because he ruined Sage's 17th birthday. After that, he disowned his own son out of hypocrisy the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested for that mass assault. So for everything I just said, I say Senor Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Cadence. I call upon my next witness, Katrina Gonzales Bennett.
I agree with my twin hermana, Cadence, and our older hermano, Lucas. Even though Senor Buford's not as bad as Senor Webster, the former's slightly worse than our former poppy. So, for everything he did to Deacon and the Martels, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Katrina. I call upon my next witness, Tom Bennett.
I agree with my step-siblings and our parents. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Tom. I call upon my next witness, Dawn Bennett.
I'm on the same page as my brother. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Dawn. I call upon my next witness, Dex Bennett.
You know, when I heard about the stuff Mr. Buford did, I was totally shocked. And here I thought that the Martel brothers and their dad were bad. Sure, the Martel brothers bullied Deacon for having long hair, but his own dad tricked them into assaulting him all because he ruined Sage's 17th birthday. That's over the top. So I speak for my crew and my family when I find Mr. Buford guilty of child abuse and police corruption.
Thank you, Dex. I call upon my next witness, Irvin Pitts.
You know, Shawn, when the truth about Sage bullying Trip, Deacon, and Caden came out, I thought his dad Charles was the brains behind the mass assault against Deacon. But ever since I found out you were the one who framed Charles for setting up the mass assault between the Sage crew and your own son and falsified the police reports, I was wrong. You tricked all of us. Even your own wife Savannah. So for everything you've done to your own family and the Martells, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Evan. I call upon my next witness, Lisa Stathampitz.
I agree with Irvin. Shawn, what you did was a terrible betrayal of your own family's trust. And the trust of the very city we all came from. You're almost as bad as my ex-husband. So for corrupting your former precinct, framing Charles for the scandal, falsifying the police reports, and abusing, neglecting, and disowning Deacon, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Lisa. I call upon my next witness, Gerald Websterpitz.
It was bad enough that Mr. Jones orchestrated most of the mass assaults that occurred back at Springfield. But what Mr. Buford had the Sage Crew do to his own son was even worse. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Gerald. I call upon my next witness, Dylan Pitts.
I agree with Gerald. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Dylan. I call upon my next witness, Samantha Webster Pitts.
It was bad enough that Deacon got bullied by the Martell brothers for having long hair. What you did, Mr. Buford, was much worse. First you set up that mass assault war between the Sage Crew and your own son. Then you disowned him out of hypocrisy when he and Simona got expelled and arrested. And finally, you created a police corruption scandal within the Springfield Police Department and pinned the blame on Mr. Martell for it, especially before he fired you. And the worst thing you've ever done since Deacon and Simona got bailed out was threatening to shoot him when he confronted you about all the stuff you did to him. Your own son. So for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Samantha. I call upon my next witness, Savannah Websterpitz.
I agree with my twin sister. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Savannah Websterpitz. I call upon my next witness, Carson Pitts.
I'm on the same page as my older brother and our dad and step-siblings. I say Mr. Buford's guilty.
Thank you, Carson. I call upon my next witness, Ramona Pitts.
So am I. Mr. Buford's a bad cop. A very, very bad man. Guilty, 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 guilty.
Thank you, Ramona. I call upon my next witness, Damian Pitts.
Gotta agree with my family and the rest of the Dex crew on this one. The Martell brothers may have planned the first mass assault against Tripp, but they ain't never wanted to assault any of his friends, especially Deacon. What Mr. Buford did to his own boy was so uncalled for, and for abusing and neglecting him and giving the Martells a bad name, I say that corrupts comes guilty.
Thank you, Damien. I call upon my next witness, Russell Peterson.
You know, I can definitely sympathize with Sage when it comes to being gaslighted. Mr. Buford reminds me of my dad because he forced me and my sister Jenny to get revenge on the Conroy sisters and a friend of theirs named Dylan for ruining her 16th birthday. We never wanted to get revenge on those three in the first place, but our dad threatened to ground us if we didn't do that. So our crew suffered the same fate as the Sage Crew. So what Mr. Buford had the Sage Crew do to Deacon was just as bad as what my dad had me, my sister, and the rest of our crew do to Amy, Julie, and Dylan. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
I don't know if this is true or not, but may I call Jenny Peterson up to the stand, please? Jenny, is everything your brother said about your dad true?
Yes, it is, Your Honor. Everything my brother said was true. Our dad forced us to form a mass assault against the Conroy sisters and Dylan. And it's similar to when Mr. Buford had the Sage Crew do the same thing to his own son, but neither Dylan nor the Conroy sisters got shot. And in the end, we were all tricked into beating Dylan to death. After that, we got backlash from his parents. Russell and I regretted ever doing that in the first place. And so did our friends. But it was mainly our dad's fault we got into that mess. And more importantly, Mr. Buford's as much of a gaslighter as our dad was back in 2023.
Oh dear. Jenny, you and your brother went down the same path as the Sage Crew did. I had no idea your father manipulated you two to get violent towards those three.
Yeah. I mean, I did apologize to Amy and Julie eventually when I found out that they were abused by their dad. I just wish I could do the same with Dylan, but I can't, since he's dead.
You know, Jenny, I think you and your brother are going to need to see a therapist. You did the right thing apologizing to Amy and Julian owning up to that mass assault against them and Dylan, but his death is something you'll have to live with. In the meantime, I call upon my next witness, Tariq Parks.
From what my daughter Bonkisha told me and her stepmother, Shawn tricked Sage into getting revenge on his own son, Deacon, for ruining his 17th birthday by starting a mass assault war between them and got the rest of the Sage crew involved. Afterwards, he disowned Deacon out of hypocrisy and denied full responsibility of planning the whole thing in the first place and set up a corruption scandal within the Springfield police force. And the worst thing is, he framed Charles Martel for it. That is so messed up, man. So for everything he's done, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Tariq. I call upon my next witness, Sabrina Parks.
I agree with Tariq. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Sabrina. I call upon my next witness, Bonkisha Parks.
You know, Mr. Buford, when I saw that apology video made by the Martel brothers, I couldn't believe it with my own eyes. You've been a sick man from day number one? Sick. So for all the stuff you did to the Martel brothers and your own son Deacon, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Bonkisha. I call upon my next witness, Russ Levine.
I agree with Bonkisha. I may be an undercover cop, but I've never come across a sick, corrupt cop like you. You abused and neglected your own son and corrupted your own police force back at Springfield and framed the Martel brothers' biological father for it. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Russ. I call upon my next witness, Maria Easton.
Maria, you're testifying against me after when you and Dad saw Simona.
That's right, Shawn. And by the way, I had no intention of doing that or giving Simona a belt beating. Dan forced me to do all that stuff with him. Just like you tricked Savannah into disowning Deacon after when you set up a mass assault war between your own son and the Sage crew. And the worst thing is, you threatened to shoot him when he got bailed out. Your own son. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Traitor, how can you be against me on this? Deacon and Simona tried to kill Sage and Abigail.
If you are trying to object to Maria's statement, you could have just said so. But one way or another, I'll overrule your objection, because you did set that mass assault war up. And speaking of Simona, she'd like to have a word with you.
Mr. Buford, you're just as bad as my dad. You set up that mass assault war between me, your own son Deacon, and the Sage crew. And you even tricked his mum into disowning him. You even threatened to kill your own son after when he and I got bailed out. You've been a sick, corrupt cop this whole time. And for everything you've done, I say you're guilty. Consider yourself lucky that I broke up with him. Besides, you didn't want him hanging out with me when we were troublemakers anyways.
Thank you, Simona. I call upon my next witness, Adrianna Easton.
I agree with my sister and their mom. Mr. Buford, what you did was psychotic and out of line. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Adrianna. I call upon my next witness, Jeff Hawke.
You know, when my wife told me that Shawn falsified a police report on the corruption scandal that occurred at his old precinct back at Springfield, I couldn't believe it myself. But when our son Jared told us about Shawn plotting a mass assault war between his own son Deacon, Simona, and the Sage crew, I couldn't be even more shocked and disappointed. And not only that, he framed Charles Martel for all that and tricked Savannah into following along with Deacon's disowning the day their son and Simona got expelled and arrested. Shawn, what you did to your own son was completely unacceptable. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Jeff Hawke. I call upon my next witness, Skyhawk.
I may be a rookie here at the Rapid City Police Department upon moving here from New Jersey, but I know a corrupt cop when I see one. And you, Shawn, you're it. So for all your crimes against your own family, against the Martels, and against the entire Sage crew and our eldest son's new girlfriend, I find you guilty as charged.
Thank you, Officer Hawke. I call upon my next witness, Jed Hawke.
So, you're the corrupt scum who put Deacon and Simona through so much pain, huh? You know, Mr. Buford, I heard a bit about you. You tricked the Sage crew into committing a mass assault against Deacon, your own son. Then on the day he and Simona got expelled and arrested, you disowned him out of hypocrisy and tricked his mom into following along with it. and as payback for getting you fired, you framed Sage and Vincent's dad for corrupting your former precinct. And when Deacon and the Martells confronted you about all the stuff you did, you threatened to shoot him in front of his mom. Dude, what you did was totally uncalled for. You are so sick in the head, man. Sick. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Judd. I call upon my next witness, Shawn Hawk.
I agree with Jared. I find Deacon not guilty as charged.
Thank you, Shawn Hawk. I call upon my next witness, Gordon Clay.
You know, I'm honestly not surprised. I've been working as an officer for the Anaheim Police Department, and I'll tell you, Shawn, you're not the first corrupt cop I've ever met. And I'm pretty sure you won't be the last.
Wait a minute. Gordon, you're a police officer from Anaheim, and the defendant wasn't the first corrupt cop you've ever met.
Yeah. And the last time I had to deal with a scumbag like Shawn was when my precinct arrested a self-proclaimed police officer from Louie 95's channel. And that officer, Officer Stephen, bailed my stepdaughter's former father out of jail and threatened to send my co-workers to Dublin, Ireland.
Gordon, I know this is irrelevant to the case, but how come your stepdaughter's former father got arrested in the first place?
Ashley's former father, Rick Hazelin, has been abusing her due to a difference in religious beliefs. For example, he tried to give her a punishment day or because she got ungrounded upon being proven innocent of a whoopee cushion prank that occurred during class at Flowery Mill. Her old high school principal, Trevor Slope, conducted an investigation after when she got sent to his office and checked the surveillance to find out whether she was lying or not, and even though Ashley's mother, Emmett, lifted her grounding after receiving the call from Principal Slope confirming her innocence, Rick still abused her.
You mean Rick still gave Ashley a punishment day, even if Emmett ungrounded her, after when their daughter's innocence got proven by Trevor?
Yes. And as part of the punishment day, Rick's first punishment for her was a very cold shower, which got her sick in the process. Afterwards, he tried to break her legs with a spiked bat but was stopped by Emmett. Emmett even called the police on him when he violated her custody agreement with the court, and since Shawn falsified the police reports that were made at Springfield and threatened to shoot his own son for confronting him, that makes him as bad as Rick was. Therefore, I find the defendant guilty as charged.
Okay, Gordon. Thank you for your testimony, I guess. I call upon my next witness, Emmett Clay.
I agree with Gordon. Shawn reminds me of Rick because he threatened to shoot his own son, which is exactly what my ex did to one of the officers from the Anaheim Police Department. So for that, I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Emmett. I call upon my next witness, Ashley Haslund Clay.
You know, Mr. Buford, one heard a bit about you. You severely punished Deacon by tricking the Sage Crew into committing a mass assault against him and Simona. Tricked his mom into disowning him the day he got expelled and arrested along with his ex, corrupted your own precinct, and framed Officer Martell for everything you did. You're as bad as my dad was. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Ashley. By the way, I heard about the stuff your former father did to you. I was really shocked to learn how badly he treated you. It must have been really traumatizing.
It was. My dad's been abusing me and acting like an overly religious control freak. He always assumes that I was gonna cause trouble, which wasn't always the case. In a sense, he wanted me to cause trouble so that he can find an excuse to abuse me. He even used religion as another excuse for the exact same purpose.
At least now you won't have to worry about your father since he's out of your life. Anyways, I call upon my next witness, Patrick Clay.
You know, at first, Luke and Victoria told me and my friends that he, along with Sage, Vincent, Michael, and Dustin, bullied Tripp, Deacon, and Caden. But we were also shocked to learn that you, Mr. Buford, planned a mass assault against not just Deacon, but Simona too. You even falsified a police report on a corruption scandal. And on the day Deacon and Simona got expelled and arrested, you tricked the former's mother into disowning him. And you framed Sage and Vincent's dad for everything he did. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Patrick. I call upon my next witness, Kevin Fenderson.
So, you're the corrupt cop my nephew and niece were talking about. You know, I'm totally shocked to learn how badly you treated your own son. You're as bad as my brother Clarence.
Wait a minute. Kevin, how bad is your brother Clarence compared to the defendant?
Until the day he and my sister-in-law got arrested, he ran a mega church known as the Revelation Church and has been exposed as a false prophet numerous times. There were also rumors about him stealing church funds for his own personal use, which were confirmed to be true the day he got arrested. Even though the crimes Clarence committed were different compared to those committed by Shawn, what that corrupt cop was just as bad. And like my niece Marilyn, Deacon was disowned for something that wasn't even serious enough to begin with. Therefore, I say Shawn's guilty.
Why exactly did your niece get disowned?
For the exact same reason why Eric's been abusing Ashley. A difference in religion, which is stupid because it drove my nephew Rashad and my niece Marilyn to cause trouble.
Okay Kevin. Thank you for your testimony, I guess. Anyway, I call upon my next witness, Jeff Henderson.
What kind of police officer does such horrible things to his own son? I mean, come on Mr. Buford. What were you thinking? You totally crossed the line here, mister. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Jeff. I call upon my next witness, Rashad Henderson.
Mr. Buford, you think you could just severely punish Deacon and disown him out of hypocrisy and get away with it? No way, Jose. You're as bad as my parents were. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Rashad. I call upon my next witness, Marilyn Henderson.
As someone who got disowned for something that was never too serious to begin with, I know how that feels because my parents did that to me because I became an atheist. Because of that, I was separated from my brother Rashad. What Mr. Buford did to Deacon was just as bad as what my parents did to me. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Marilyn. By the way, I'm sorry to hear that your parents kicked you out due to a difference in religion.
Yeah. My parents were always acting like overly religious control freaks like Ashley's dad was, in spite of stealing crew funds from not just the workers, but those less fortunate. But at least the Revelation Church got shut down and my parents got what they deserved.
That's good to hear. Anyway, I call upon my next witness, Jonathan Bagwell.
From what Veronica told me and her mother, Shawn's been as bad of a parent as Rick Hazelin and Clarence Henderson were due to how badly he treated Deacon. He also threatened to shoot his own son in front of Savannah when he and the Martells confronted him at their apartment, corrupted his old precinct at Springfield, and framed Charles Martell for everything he did, including that mass assault he planned against not just Deacon, but Simona too. Therefore, I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Jonathan. I call upon my next witness, Rachel Bagwell.
I agree with Jonathan. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Rachel. I call upon my next witness, Veronica Bagwell.
Mr. Buford, while I understood why Simona broke up with your son in the first place, I now understand how they both got into that mess with the mass assaults in the first place. You planned that mass assault against them yourself. And for what? Because Deacon ruined Sage's 17th birthday? That's pathetic. And worse, you corrupted the police department at Springfield and framed Mr. Martell for it. And to add further insult, you had the nerve to threaten to shoot your own son when he and the Martells confronted you at your apartment. Dude, you have totally crossed the line here. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Veronica. I call upon my next witness, Jefferson Clinton.
Mr. Buford, what you've done to the Sage Crew, Simona, and your own son Deacon was so uncalled for ruining not just your family's lives, but the lives of the Martells. I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Jefferson. I call upon my next witness, Zephyr Parker.
From what my brother Steve told me, Simona and her ex-boyfriend got brutally attacked by the Sage Crew, who have been tricked into doing so by his own dad. That was so not cool. For that, I find Deacon's dad guilty as charged.
Thank you, Zephyr. I call upon my next witness, Steve Parker.
I agree with Zephyr. Mr. Buford, you not only abused Deacon and got Simona hurt in the process of that mass assault you set up, but you ruined the Sage Crew's lives. Even the Martell family. And for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Steve. I call upon my next witness, Desarius Vargringer.
You know, Shawn, My wife and I heard a bit about you. You plotted a mass assault war against your own son and his ex, got the whole Sage crew involved in it, tricked Savannah into following along with Deacon's disowning, corrupted your former precinct, framed Charles Martel for all that, and threatened to shoot your own son. For all the stuff you've done, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Tazarius. I call upon my next witness, Jocelyn Vargringer.
I agree with Tazarius. I say Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I call upon my next witness, Christella Vargringer.
You know, Mr. Buford, as someone who was a victim of child abuse, I know how Deacon felt.
Wait, Christella, you were a victim of child abuse too? Whatever happened to you?
Well, when I was 9 years old, my biological mom died of leukemia. Then my stepmom killed my biological dad by overdosing him with drugs while she was high on drugs herself. And during my 4th grade year, when I was 10 years old, my stepmom forced me to do chores with the unrealistic expectation of me getting them done in 30 minutes. And whenever I'm unable to get a certain chore finished in 30 minutes, she beat me up with a bat. And when she ordered a pizza for herself and her friend, she refused to share it with me and demanded me to make a sandwich for myself, giving me limits on what I can and can't eat. And worst of all, when I grabbed a plate to make myself a sandwich, I accidentally knocked over a bottle of beer. But when I ran over to the dinner table to confess, she severely injured me with a sparked bat. Because of that, I had to get sent to the hospital and my stepmother got arrested. But compared to all the abuse my former stepmom put me through, what you did, Mr. Buford, was just as bad. For all the abuse you put Deacon through, I say you're guilty.
Oh dear. Poor Christella. Poor you. Why, Shawn, the abuse you put Deacon through just became a constant reminder of the pain and suffering Christella went through at the hands of her former stepmother. You neglected your own son just as much as Christella's former stepmother did her. Anyway, I think it's time to hear my next witness has to say about this. Speaking of which, may I call victim and Dizzer up to the stand, please?
You know, Shawn, when I heard about the stuff you did to your own son, I found it hard to believe. You're as bad as Rick Haslam and Clarence Fenderson, and for that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Victor. I call upon my next witness, Felix Mendoza.
Senor Buford, it's one thing for your son to get bullied by Sage, Vincent, Luke, Michael, and Dustin for having long hair. But for you to plan a mass assault against him and trick the Sage crew into assaulting him and Simona at the same time, that's even worse. And you even framed Senor Martel for that and corrupting your old precinct. For that, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Felix Mendoza. I call upon my next two witnesses, Crowtoon Productions Incorporated and Crow Girl 22.
First, Alan Jones gaslighted the Sage crew into assaulting Trip, Alexine, Caden, Annex and Meixsell, and Lena and Aurora. And now Shawn Buford tripped the former Gan into doing the same thing to Deacon, his own son. Just when you think one corrupt trickster of an authority figure was bad enough, now there's two of them. But what's worse, it had to be a corrupt cop.
Yeah, no kidding. And aside from the mass assault, Shawn even framed Charles Martel for that and corrupting their old precinct at the Springfield Police Department. Then he cheated on Savannah with a bunch of strippers behind her back. And finally, he threatened to shoot Deacon when he and the Martels confronted him.
And with all that said and done, we say that Shawn's guilty.
Thank you, Crowtoon Productions Incorporated and Crow Girl 22. I call upon my next witness, Carnimations aka Spite Animate.
Shawn Buford, what you did back in Springfield was totally uncalled for. First, you tricked the Sage crew into forming a mass assault against your own son Deacon for ruining Sage's 17th birthday. Then you disowned him out of hypocrisy when he and Simona got expelled and arrested. After that, you framed Charles Martel for making up a police corruption scandal within the precinct he fired you from. Then you cheated on your own wife with a bunch of strippers behind her back. And finally, you threatened to shoot your own son when he confronted you about all the stuff he did. Honestly, you're so sick in the head, dude. Totally sick. And for everything I just mentioned, I say you're guilty.
Thank you, Carnimations. I call upon my next witness, Eric Des Anti-Ago.
Aside from everything Shawn did to Deacon and the Martels,
He threatened to beat me up if I didn't start hating his own son. Therefore, I say he's guilty.
Thank you, Eric des Anti-Ago. I call upon my last witness, Savannah Buford.
Savannah, don't you dare testify against me.
Too bad, Shawn. You brought this on yourself. Anyway, Your Honor, Shawn was the worst guy I've ever married. He tricked me into disowning Deacon after having been the one who had the Sage Crew form a mass assault against him. Our own son. All because he ruined Sage's 17th birthday. He then framed Charles Martel for ever planning that mass assault war in the first place and setting up a corruption scandal within our old city's police department. And the worst thing he's ever done to Deacon was threatening to shoot him when he and the Martels confronted him for all the stuff he did behind my back. And the worst thing he's ever done behind my back was cheating on me with a bunch of strippers. And ever since I saw Shawn threaten to shoot our own son and heard that he cheated on me, not only did I begin to regret disowning Deacon, but Shawn broke my heart. He is selfish, a sick monster, a corrupt cop, and a womanizer. I never should have married him in the first place. I want to file him for a divorce. I never want to see him again.
Oh, poor Savannah. Poor you. You don't deserve to be treated like that. Shawn, how could you be so cruel, and cheat on your own wife, and use her to disown your own son like that? What in the bloody world is wrong with you? You know what? Forget it. I think I should leave it to your son, to have a say in this whole matter. Speaking of which, I call upon the last main victim of the crime, Deacon Buford.
Dad, you have not only been a terrible father, but you've also been a sick monster from the very beginning. You neglected me when I got bullied and assaulted by the Martels, set up that whole mass assault between me and my former bullies all because I ruined Sage's 17th birthday, falsified the police reports about the mass assault and framed Mr. Martel for the corruption scandal you orchestrated, threatened to shoot me, and finally, you cheated on my mom. All this time you could have helped me when I was getting bullied when you actually ruined my life. And for that, I say you're guilty. I never want to see you again, you selfish jerk.
Thank you, Deacon. Okay, it appears that I have reached a verdict. Shawn, I find you guilty and sentence you to 80 years in prison. Savannah will have full custody of Deacon and you'll be forced to sign the divorce papers. Officer Tanaka, take him away. Court adjourned.
All right, Shawn. This is your cell. You'll be staying in there for 80 years. Don't even think about escaping.
Great, I can't believe I got sentenced to spend 80 years in prison and Savannah took full custody of Deacon. This betrayal is even worse than when Maria turned against me. Curse those meddling Martels and my good-for-nothing son. When I get out of here, they're all gonna pay.
I wouldn't bet on that, Shawn. If you even try to escape, the police will know and they'll be after you. Now stay in your cell and think about what you did.
Oh, shut up, Crotoon Productions Incorporated. It's your fault I'm even in this mess.
Too bad. And you brought this on yourself. Now.
Give up! You've lost!
I may have lost this battle, but sooner or later, the Martels and my family will lose the war. I'll be back.
In your dreams, corrupt scum.